Today, due to popular demand, I'm going to be reviewing some outdoor projects that I made this time last year to see how they're fared after 1 year of being in the elements, including this rather controversial outdoor socket that many of you said that by now will be full of water, but it's okay, I've got a bucket. Really is such a nice spring day. So this is the concrete top table that I made near enough this time last year, and as you can imagine, this large lump of concrete on the top is still in the same condition structurally as when I poured it. What it has got on it, quite interestingly, is this sort of mottled effect. It's got some very light surface cracking and a very slight white pigmentation, probably just from the rain coming down and sitting on it. And I think that's probably right because there's less of it on the side as well. The side is a lot darker, although there is some of these sort of surface cracks, and those surface cracks are not structural. They're essentially just the mix that I used for the concrete. Maybe it's a little bit dry, maybe there definitely wasn't any additives in, because I didn't actually put any additives other than the colouring in. And this little drip detail here has worked incredibly well, and I remember being out here in the winter when it was absolutely chucking it down with rain, and none of the water that was hitting the top was actually coming down and reaching this timber. It was actually dripping off here just as planned. So if you can, that's well worth putting that sort of detail in. It's still as heavy as the day I built it, and obviously I haven't moved it because it's such a struggle to move, so it's still sitting in exactly the same place as you saw it on the video as well. Let's have a quick look at the timber, shall we? So my first impressions on what the timber work is looking like, I must admit, it looks pretty similar to the day I put it out. Obviously it's got a little bit of rain sort of debris on it that would just come off with a bit of a damp cloth. But the joints are really good. They've not moved at all, but then they were pretty well glued in. The wood itself was treated, and with this stain obviously protects it as well. There's a little bit of dust down here, and that's just the rain making a little bit of dirt on that. That would come off with a brush as well. It's very clean on the underside, not that anyone's going to look at that. It's doing amazingly well. But the thing that I was always worried about was essentially the capillary action at the end grain on the bottom of the legs, and that's why I put some plastic feet just to elevate it a few millimeters. And let's see if I can see what's happening down here. So this is where I picked it up, just with some plastic feet on the top, and as I look under there, that's still working quite nicely. There's probably a 4mm gap between the paving and the timber, and although I remember painting that with black bitumen, it's not actually sitting on the timber, so when it does rain and there's a lot of water on here, it's not actually affecting the woodwork at all. Very happy with that, and this is actually exposed to everything the weather has to give us here. The prevailing wind is coming off the fields at the back, so this side of the house is the thing that gets all the wind and the rain. So this has just been sitting here, and I must admit, other than a little bit of dirt that can be cleaned off with a damp rag, it looks like it's just been put out last week. So that gives me the confidence that the stain that I'm using and the glue in the joints and the whole sort of theory about how I'm building these is actually working pretty well. Obviously elevating it off the floor I think helped quite a lot, because we don't want that end grain to be sucking up water all winter as well. And this, although it's a little bit, let's say, mottled compared to how I first put it out, actually is adding character to it now. It's looking like it's a more established rather than just been built. So this is really going to be working well for us over the summer. So what should we go on for now? Let's go and have a look at the garage door. And so to my famous fake garage door, and this is actually built with redwood TGV. I couldn't get any treated timber. That was in the middle of the pandemic and you just couldn't get your hands on it. So this is untreated redwood, just painted once again with the Cupinol garden shades. Probably about 3 coats on this, because the knots tended to suck in a lot of the paint as if I remember. And I have to say, this is on like the protected side of the garage. The rain and the wind tends to hit the other side, so this is on the more protected side, so it's got a little bit of advantage there. So let's have a look around the perimeter and see if we can see any damage. I think the gap that I left around the whole perimeter has really helped it, because it's not actually in contact with the ground or the brickwork either side. So I don't know how well this comes out on video, but where these knots are, it's not as if the paint hasn't taken. I think it's just sucked the paint in more than the rest of the timber. So when the light's in a certain angle, you can actually see them, and this is why I think when I first put this up, I put about 3 coats on, and between one of the coats I just went over each knot as well, and it looks like it's just done the same. So I think I'm going to have to put another coat of paint on here. It's not as if it's not protected, it's just that, as I say, from a certain angle these knots just highlight themselves. I think just looking straight on in normal daylight you can't really see it, and especially from a distance. The other thing that seems to have worked is just leaving a little gap between each tongue and groove. It seems to have worked out quite nicely. These have closed up somewhat. I think that's probably over the winter, where it's just sort of sucked up a little bit of moisture. And I noticed last summer they opened a little bit, but they're still dead flat and there's no movement at all, especially no bowing out or no massive gaps as well. So it seems to work quite nicely. So obviously leaves and stones and that tend to get into this bottom section, but once again, it's because it's elevated, it's actually doing really well because it's not touching anything. And any splashes of water when it rains is only sort of temporary, it just runs off. So there's no damage there, no rot or anything that I'm worried about at all. And as predicted, I've only actually opened this door. Now where is it? I've only opened this. I've only opened this centre secret door section maybe 2 or 3 times in the last year. I generally use the door at the side and this stays well closed, so that sort of helps as well. I think a quick brush down of the cobwebs and another coat of paint and that'll be okay for the summer. So what's next? While I'm looking at old projects, I just thought I'll mention quickly my hose, which was one of the first and has served me really well over the last year, both for building projects as well as watering the garden. I did take it off for a little bit in the middle of the winter, but we've had a really mild winter, so that wasn't for long. And the fixing is still working incredibly well, nice and strong. And out of all the times I've used it, not once has it ever jammed. The system that actually distributes the hose left and right, backwards and forwards as you wind it in, means that it's never actually jammed inside this box. The only thing I would change is this outside tap, and I'm actually going to do it now because it only takes 2 minutes. Although it works really well for the hose, no problem there. I tend to use a hose and a watering can continuously, so this is coming on and off all the time. So what I've done is I've just gone and bought one of these from Amazon, which is a dual outlet, so I can have the hose connected continuously on one and still use the other for a watering can. So I'm going to do that now. I've just turned the water off. Let's see if I can undo this.
Maybe it's something in the water, or maybe we just hit the end of the road. Right now it doesn't even matter. It's too late not to let it go. And that's why I wish you the best and say goodbye. You start to get dressed and then we cry, 'cause we both know it's gonna hurt.
And what's nice about the new one, which is this one I got from Amazon, and it's only really cheap, it actually comes with a small roll of PTFE tape. Now I've got plenty of PTFE tape, but where it is, I have no idea. And you always want to wrap this round clockwise, which means that when you turn it into the socket, it tightens up rather than unfolding. Let's try this. Now when you're fitting an outside tap like this, it can be a little bit of trial and error, because depending on how much PTFE tape you put on also depends on where you end up, because you don't want to end up in that position. So I want to put more tape on, so when I get to this position it's nice and tight. So I'm going to put a little bit more tape. I'm just going to leave what's already there on. Sometimes the only way is a suck it and see way, I'm afraid. This isn't rocket science, this is DIY. I want it to really start biting and getting tight fairly soon. Okay, that's better, but that's not it. So what I've done is actually put more of it here rather than here, so as it winds on it starts bunching up against this flange here. Hopefully that'll give us something to tighten it against. Let's see. Okay, so let me go and put the water on and see if we've got a bit of a tight seal. Better turn it off first, don't you? Well, the water is on. That looks pretty good actually. No drips or leaks at the moment, let's just say. Ooh. Brilliant. It even comes with these connectors that fit the hose lock system. So well, they sort of fit the hose lock system. That didn't work very well, did it? Was that just me? Okay, so they come with these connectors that look like they fit the hose lock system, but don't fit the hose lock system. Let's use this plastic one, shall we? This is going to work because this is what I've been using for the last year. There you go. Now that's better.
I was your first love, and you were my first one. Cheers to all the memories, the venom and the remedies, yeah. Promise I won't forget, yeah. Maybe it's something in the water, yeah. Or maybe we just hit the end of the road. Right now it doesn't even matter, yeah. It's too late not to late.
So I hope a lot of you recognise these planters, either from the video I put out a year ago showing you how to build them, or my last video from just a few days ago where I added a couple of trellises to them as well. If you haven't gone and seen the video, go and have a look at it. It's quite a nice build, although I wasn't the star of the show. My new friend Speedy was obviously the star of that video. So go and have a look and you'll see what I mean. So my plan for these this year is just to give them a coat of paint just to spruce them up. I've not really looked at them. Let's have a look and see how they've fared through the winter. So firstly, looking at the joints on the corner, I assume all the corners are the same. They're still fairly tight, and I remember all of these were screwed together and also glued together as well. So it's not surprising that these joints haven't really gone anywhere. This ended up as one big lump of wood. Obviously, there's a little bit of dust and rubbish where the rain has got to it. There's a bit of a scrape there as well. You have to remember, this was untreated timber, so this is just plain C16 CLS 3x2, I think it is, untreated. So this is just completely untreated timber. The only protection it's really got is A, the paint on the outside, and B, once again, I put the plastic feet on the bottom to try to elevate it so it's not sitting in the wet at all. So let's have a look at the bottom, see how that's faring. So just having a look on the underneath. I remember now, these were the only treated boards I used right at the bottom, because obviously as you water the planter, the water soaks through to here. So you've got to use treated boards here because these are obviously going to be quite damp. But there's a plastic membrane between the soil and the untreated wood all the way around. So that helps the inside of this wood from getting attacked. Obviously these plastic feet help a lot because these must be 6-7 mil deep and just elevates these bits of wood from sitting in water. But from what I can see there, I must say, that looks pretty good.
Then we cry, 'cause we both know it's gonna hurt, but not as much as this does, so baby, bye.
There's a split in the top piece of timber where it's dried out, and that looks like it's taken off some of the paintwork as well. And one of the corner joints has opened up slightly, although that was screwed in and glued. Obviously with the contraction of the timber, that's opened up a little bit, and something that I'll probably fill just before I paint. So that brings us to the outdoor socket, and if you didn't see my video on this socket, this is wired into the house into a plug that then goes into an inside socket. So you can think of it as an outdoor extension cable with a waterproof socket on the end of it, which means I can actually take out that plug and completely isolate this from the rest of the house like it is at the moment. There's no electricity going here, and there's also no chance of any short and any trip on the RCD because it's totally isolated. And when I put it on, I did put a lot of silicone around the back to make a seal. I also siliconed the top and the sides, and more importantly, I siliconed between the cable and the conduit on the inside at this end, and the cable and the conduit in the house as well. So there's no warm house air getting into this box, and that's what most people are concerned of. There's the warm air on the inside getting into this box and then hitting the cold box, and then you get condensation in the box. Not necessarily rainwater, you get condensation. And that's why some people are a little bit stressed out that I didn't actually drill out the drain plug, because to me, drilling out the drain plug actually opens up a way of getting water in here. So let's open this and see if there's any water inside, shall we? So there you go, absolutely dry as a bone. As I said, I actually siliconed between the cable here and the conduit, so there's no route for air to come in through the house. I also siliconed between the conduit and the box and the conduit and the wall, so there's no route here for anything to come in. The drain plug down here I didn't open, so it's just a small box that's completely sealed. Even from the front, there's no way that anything's coming in because it's got this rather nice seal all around the perimeter. I could never see how water was going to get in here, and I think I've been proved right as well. In fact, it still looks as clean as the day I put it in, which isn't surprising because this is a completely sealed unit. This plastic seal does a good job of keeping everything out, and if you've tightened everything up, I don't see where anything's going to come in or out from. So I must admit, it is nice after a year just to confirm what I thought was going to happen, and that's going to last an awful long time and come in handy for lots of garden jobs as well. So it's just about the end of the day, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on the channel and please subscribe, and please go and check out our Patreon page where the membership is growing. It'd be great to see you over there, to see your support with extra videos and content every week. So until next time, I was right.